Buongiorno.
Mark my words, Mel. Early by Christmas.
Even now, less than a score of years after the World War,
Hostilities exist. There is no blinking at the fact.
we shall never surrender!
This is the Militaria Podcast, brought to you by your friends at Queen City Militaria, Wehrmacht Militaria, and SMG War Relics.
You're gonna know that you have many arch enemies.
Mm-hmm. That's damn true.
This wasn't a good intro because you named names. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
But
You can just cut this out.
We can't cut anything out, and I'll tell you why. Because welcome to the Militaria Podcast. My name is Joshua Doda. I run Queen City Militaria, and I'm joined today and on every episode by my friends Dante Gambino of SMG War Relics.
How we doing, guys?
And Billy Kramer of WWII.com.
I would just like to let the audience know I did not wear my hat. I wasn't aware that this was the hat episode. Everybody else has a hat, but here I am just showing off my gray hairs.
Dude, I think it shows that we're getting really in sync with each other. You know what I mean? Everybody just went hats, except for you. But I mean, at least you're aware of it. You know,
I didn't get the memo.
Improvement.
Nope, nobody sent me. I didn't get an email.
Dante, how's it going over there for you? What's new, bud?
Oh, just a lot of the same. Buying a lot. Sales are okay, but this time of year, I feel like things slow down just a little bit. People are outside. They're on vacation. They're not necessarily really focusing on their collections, but for some reason, the opposite is true of the sellers. They're coming out of the woodwork. They're looking to sell their collections. Maybe they need money for their vacation, and they're letting go of their collections. So I'm doing a lot of buying right now.
Nice, dude. I've noticed the same thing. I get the summer slowdown when it comes to people buying stuff, but I get offered a lot more. And that brings me to Billy Kramer. What's new with you?
Well, I'm very different than Dante. I've bought too much, and I'm drowning. I have probably 1,000 things I need to photograph and list. I'm actually in big trouble with myself because I've not been doing my due diligence and taking photos. I've just been kind of today. The stock market went ballistic, so I was focused on the stock market all day. I day traded pretty much in my pajamas till about 3 p.m. But it was an awesome day, and this has been a really good day for me. That's my story.
It sounds like a nice day.
Yeah.
I just, I didn't want to take up the time before I introduced you, but I will say I've been buying too, and I just bought this really cool badge that you guys were hearing about earlier. Did you see this cool badge?
Tell me about
this badge. This is a little 1957 World Ice Hockey Championships press badge from the Soviet Union. It's just a neat little thing I picked up on eBay. Have you heard about it?
I noticed when you were showing pictures that the pin's a little smaller than I'd like to see on a badge of that size.
The thing is, dude, it's still not super high quality because it's still
Soviet. Yeah.
All right, Bill. You don't have to try to hurt me. You don't have to try to hurt me, bud.
Sorry.
What's everybody having for a drink tonight?
Tonight, we're going back to the left hand, a little chai milk stout, my favorite left hand.
You do like milk stouts. Yeah.
Yes, he likes left hand, too. This is the second time you plugged him on the show. Bill, what do you got?
Like a college kid, I got a red Solo cup filled with Miller Lite. It's nothing impressive. It's just, it is what it is, gentlemen. Dante likes good beer. I envy that. I went with yellow American beer today.
Well, good is subjective, I mean, for some, Miller Lite is good beer. So, do you.
I am doo-doo. Doing me.
Wow, he said doo-doo. I know you guys are wondering. I know you guys are thinking, what's Josh drinking? He's always got something fun. Tonight, I got San Pellegrino Blood Orange.
Oh, man. I have one of those in the fridge. Maybe I'll join you later.
Well, I decided, I had to bust out the fancy stuff because we have somebody joining us today on the show, somebody that has been around in the hobby for a long time now. I'm sure everybody's heard the name. Somebody that's maybe a little bit of a household name. My friend, Benjamin Mack Jackson, the founder of the World War II Veterans History Project and currently working as a war correspondent. Ben, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here. Thanks for the great introduction.
Oh, actually, hold on a second. I had something planned for your introduction. It's Ben Mack Jackson. It was actually kind of anticlimactic. But we are very happy to have you here. Respect. So Ben, you've been around for a while, man. I know I've seen you in the community on Facebook and stuff for years now. I think I sold you a Victory Over Germany medal years ago, maybe like 2016. Yeah, look, well, it was $20 Facebook deals. But you're still considered a pretty young guy in the eyes of the hobby, right? So tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get started? What sparked your interest, and how old were you when that first started for you?
Well, I've always been a history buff for as long as I can remember, whether that's ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, the Titanic, and eventually World War II is what has clearly stuck with me over the years. When I was 13, it really hit me one day that instead of reading about World War II in books or watching documentary films, I could actually talk to people that were there and ask the questions that I had. And it really just started out as a personal endeavor, which has since transformed into a nonprofit organization where I dedicate my time to preserving those stories and educating them and educating future generations with these stories.
That's amazing, man. And thank you. It's important work that you're doing. I come from a family who experienced World War II in Europe, and a lot of those stories, they get lost in time if you don't take the time to really document them,
No, without a doubt, and I think that's the most critical aspect of all the work that everyone in this call does. It's preserving history first and foremost. What our motivations are in terms of a dealer, collector, historian, whatever it may be. I think we all share the common purpose, common goal of preserving history for generations to come.
So, Ben, how did you get started with the Veterans History Project? What's the origin story of that?
Well, obviously, like I said, it was just a personal passion project really to start off with. And I soon realized the importance of these stories, and people began to tell me the importance of these stories. And so as a young kid, at 14, 15 years old, I started it as a nonprofit organization, which allowed me to, actually raise funds to travel to do interviews with veterans. I've conducted hundreds in the past 9 years. I'm 22 now. And in the years since I started the project, obviously it's expanded from not just interviews, but now documentary films, traveling museum exhibitions, educational programs, and so much more. So it's really a multifaceted endeavor these days to preserve history and carry it on.
What is the mission statement of the Veterans History Project? What are your goals in this nonprofit that you founded?
Well, on paper, our mission is to give the past a future one story at a time. But I think that the overall mission for us right now is to capture these stories before it's too late, because the World War II generation is passing away at an extraordinary rate. And it's critical right now to capture these stories before all of the veterans pass on. So at least short term, our mission is to capture all of these stories before all of the World War II veterans pass. And then long term, it's going to be education. So that's through these stories that we've already captured, through historic artifacts. That's obviously going to become a much bigger part of our mission and our organization once the veterans are gone. So of course, we've already started with collecting artifacts and preserving them. But I think that long term, that's going to be one of our biggest tools, I think, to educate people and become part of our mission in a much bigger way, especially over the next 5-10 years.
When it comes to locating and finding these potential candidates for doing an interview, how do you line up all these interviews? Because I think I really admire the kind of work you're doing. I think we've almost all been in a situation where we're talking to somebody that's been there and we're like, geez, man, if I could only get a recording or a microphone in front of this guy and put this on some type of a permanent record. You're doing it, and so I admire that. But how do you get these guys lined up? What are you doing to find all this stuff?
Well, to start off with, I mean, like I said, I was 13 years old when I started doing these interviews. And the first one that I did was with a 92-year-old World War II vet who I knew in my local community. He volunteered at a museum every weekend. So I just went down there with my dad one Saturday. We sat down, did the interview with my phone stacked up on some books, a very rudimentary setup, nothing special. And that was really it. That inspired me to continue to do hundreds now over the past 9 years. And since I've created this organization and been able to put myself out there as someone who's looking to interview World War II veterans, I mean, I have people contacting me every single day across the United States and the world, asking me to interview their relatives, interview their father, interview their grandfather, great-grandfather who was in World War II. And I think that, it's just a matter of reaching all of them or as many as I can before it's too late. And I think that right now, that's the biggest problem that I'm facing, is not being able to do as many as I could have, as many as I wanted to do. Because like you said, there's nothing greater than to sit down with one of these veterans and hear their stories firsthand. It's just the greatest honor and the greatest privilege. And to have them open up and tell you stories from the most traumatic experiences of their life, especially sitting in front of their family. You know, sometimes this is the first time that they've ever opened up about their wartime experience, and it's an honor. It's a true honor and a privilege to be able to do this, without a doubt.
So I know my grandpa didn't love talking about the war, right? He was very closed-mouthed about that. So when you're sitting down, I have to ask, like, is the vet's wife and family around, or is this pretty much a closed one-on-one personal interview where these people have never heard these stories before from grandpa and they didn't even know that this happened to him for the most part?
It depends. I mean, sometimes it's just me and the vet. Sometimes it's me, the vet, and their entire family. Sometimes the extended family as well, because they're interested in the story. And I think that a lot of it depends on, you know, when I did the interview. Like when I was 13 years old, obviously I was not as knowledgeable about doing interviews, not as knowledgeable about World War II. So a lot of the questions that I asked didn't elicit the most detailed responses. But now I think that like I said, I've done hundreds. I would consider myself pretty good at being able to ask questions in a respectful and knowledgeable manner.
Do the vets get very emotional in front of you?
Yes. I think that's been one of the things that has been most, not inspiring, but most moving for me, is to see, you know, not only that they're willing to share their stories, but such emotional stories as well. And that they trust me to be able to not only listen to these stories, but be able to publish them as well, because that's a whole other thing in itself. They're growing extremely vulnerable during these interviews, oftentimes, you know, crying, sharing stories of losing their buddies in combat. It's difficult subject matter, and especially if you lived it. And I think that, you know, that's the greatest gift, is to be able to carry on that memory and be trusted with that.
Well, I know with Dick Winter's interview during Band of Brothers, I think one of the most things that sticks with you the most is that, you know, I served with heroes. When he says that and he's teary-eyed, I mean, that hits hardcore. You know what I mean? I imagine with all the, you know, vet interviews you've done, you've seen a lot of like that. I mean, it doesn't have the Hollywood, you know, HBO production behind it per se, but I'm sure you've seen a lot of stuff like that. And that has to choke you up too, in a way.
Oh, it does. And I think that, you know, it's a question that I get quite often is how do these interviews and meeting these veterans impact me? And I think that half of it is the war side. You know, you're learning, I'm learning how to become a better historian, learning, you know, more about World War II, but half of it is just, you know, learning these life lessons and hearing these stories from people who are, you know, oftentimes 100+ years old. And so I think that, you know, that's more of what I'm getting out of this project personally. I mean, I'm hearing stories of love, life, and death, and not just about war. I mean, I'm meeting couples that have been married 75, 80 years. That's, you know, just unheard of, especially to have relationships last that long in my generation.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
A lot of it is not just about the war. It's about meeting these incredible people, these incredible couples, and being able to sit there, listen, and document their story.
It is the greatest generation, and there's a lot of facets to it. I think.
It's undeniable.
Yeah.
Hey, Ben.
And that's
go ahead, Josh. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, you know, Ben, that really speaks to a skill set that you've probably developed over the course of doing this. If you got to be vulnerable with these people and build that trust with them, you know, they do see you as a safe person to talk to about these things that you know, they may not speak about otherwise. And that's got to feel, you know, like a powerful thing. I feel like, because, you know, like you said, and like we've addressed a couple of times now, some of these stories aren't even shared with family. So for these people to be able to feel that comfort with you, I mean, that must be sort of an offset to what I assume would be, I guess, some of the more emotionally difficult things that you cover with these men.
It's a good point. And I think that, you know, I don't take it for granted, this you know, this gift to be able to hear and capture these stories. Trust me, I don't. And I think that I really realized the importance of doing this work and the importance of listening to these guys speak very early on. I was 13 years old, and I sat down to do an interview with a World War II, Korea, and Vietnam veteran named Ed Wilds. And like I said, I was 13, he was 92. And that evening after our interview, he went to the hospital. And a couple of days later, he was dead. And I got a call from his wife, me, a 13-year-old kid, got a call from his wife saying that on his deathbed, he told her that he was just glad that he finally had a chance to tell his story. That was what she told me on the phone.
Wow.
That is truly special, man. That is truly special.
It gives me goosebumps today just thinking about it. But
Yeah.
from that point on, I think I realized not just the importance of being there and hearing the stories, but how much it meant for them as well. And that in their final years, they're opening up to some kid and trusting him with this, this story, and trusting him to tell it. And so now I've really dedicated my life to ensuring that the stories that I have captured and continue to capture are told in a respectful and meaningful way that reach the most amount of people possible.
Hey, Ben, question for you regarding the types of veterans that you've interviewed. I noticed that you also are interviewing and have interviewed German veterans. How do you tailor the interview, or do you tailor the interview differently than an American veteran?
So I've interviewed two German World War II veterans. I interviewed a Panzer tank commander that lived in Michigan, and I interviewed a German infantry officer that lived in Western Germany, in the western part, in the Rhineland region of Germany. And the one in Michigan, he spoke perfect English. He's been living in the U.S. for, I think, since 1952, since he got out of the Gulag in Siberia. And the one in Germany obviously spoke very little English. And so they were two totally different interviews. So I think when I answer the question, I have to make that note. But, I ask the questions that I have, and, I don't discriminate, and I don't make things, I don't know. I don't shy away from asking the difficult questions, is what I think I want to say. And thankfully, the two that I had the opportunity to speak with, and hopefully more in the future, were very open to answering honestly about what they witnessed, both before and during and after World War II, and not just from their own personal experiences, but witnessing what happened in the Third Reich and in the territories in which Nazi troops fought during World War II. I think the interview with the guy in Germany was like 3.5, 4 hours long. I mean, that's a serious, serious interview. And I did that one in 2019, and it hasn't been published yet. We're working on that. But like I said, the priority right now is to capture them before it's too late, and then get everything out. Of course, we're still releasing things, but that's beside the point. But I think that, the German vets are just as important to speak with, just because their stories are a huge part of why World War II started in the first place. And if we don't understand why it started and the men who started it, I think that it defeats the purpose of being a historian. It defeats the purpose of trying to tell the story of the war in the first place. So that's just my perspective.
So let's broaden that horizon. You're obviously interviewing Germans and Wehrmacht troops and things like that. You're talking about ETO a lot with the Americans. Do you do interview Pacific theater as well? And have you interviewed any other countries or enemies of the United States?
What's funny is that my main focus is the European theater, at least personally, interest-wise, but I've actually interviewed more Pacific theater veterans than European theater veterans over the years. But I have interviewed a British World War II veteran. I spoke with a French resistance fighter one time. Obviously, it's a little bit more difficult just because of the language barrier oftentimes, and having to get a translator and this and that. But I definitely have a desire to broaden my horizons and speak to as many nationalities and countries as possible, veterans from those different countries, just because it is the full story. And now that I'm graduated with college, I graduated in May. I have more time this year to spend and actually get overseas, spend long time over there, and actually sit down with vets who are not from the U.S.
Congratulations on graduation, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations,
We were all
man.
rooting for you, buddy, for a long time. Just hoping
We knew you could
It's
do
a
it.
long,
You know
long
what?
time coming, right?
Here, you know what? I got one last shot in the confetti gun.
There you go.
Congratulations,
There you
pal.
Did my wife
you
give
know
you
what?
that confetti gun? Did my wife give you that confetti gun? Because she's used that before in the bedroom after I'm
She's
done,
got a
so-
confetti gun, huh?
She'll be like, "Good job, you did it."
It's a smart lady right there. No, sir, I bought this confetti gun for my girlfriend's birthday.
Oh,
Getting back on,
okay, okay.
it's okay. Hey, you know what? It's fine. There's enough confetti guns to go around. So Ben, just getting back to the topic of your work with veterans here. We have a video queued up from a new series that your YouTube channel's doing to connect, more to the hobby of militaria. And I was hoping we could check that out real quick, if that sounds good to you.
Definitely. Let's give it a shot.
All righty. Full screen it, and here we go.
As American soldiers fought across Europe during World War II, they became the ultimate souvenir hunters, capturing everything imaginable from the battlefields on which they fought. In today's video, we're going to explore the story behind these two helmets, which were brought back from Germany during World War II by technician 5th grade Julius Habermann, who served in the 69th Infantry Division. The helmet here on my left is probably one of the most recognizable symbols of World War II, the German Stahlhelm. This particular helmet is an M42 Stahlhelm combat helmet, model 1942, and was the last major mass-produced German helmet during the war. There's a few interesting characteristics about this helmet which make it interesting, besides the story of how it was captured. Now, from first glance, we can see that this helmet is painted in a field gray color, which is pretty typical of the later war German helmets which were produced. And there are no decals present on either side of this helmet, as were with earlier models like the M35 or the M40. Now, a few other features on the outside of this helmet that you can see include the string, which stretches the entirety of the helmet and loops around the underside, as you can see here. And this actually had a pretty practical purpose from its original owner, the German soldier who wore this. It would have been used to put leaves and brush and other foliage as a form of camouflage for the owner. And you see these on some German helmets from the period, and the material in which this band is constructed is often a metal wire or a full chicken wire cover on the helmet. But this particular German soldier used a string, perhaps a shoestring or something similar, to use as a way to camouflage himself in a combat environment.
All right, I'm going to pause it right here for a second because I feel like Billy and Dante, you want to talk helmets for a sec?
Much as I like other collectibles in the world, baseball cards and everything else, when you hold something from World War II in your hands, and your Magic the Gathering card is cool, your Hummels are nice on that shelf, but this thing saw the battlefield of Normandy. And I just love the actual history behind these objects, and it's really cool.
No, it's beautiful stuff. All right, we'll go from there. I know you were dying to talk about it, buddy. You were saying it before we even started the video.
As we switch to the underside of the helmet here, you can see that the liner and the chin strap are present. And the owner's initials, the German soldier's owner's initials, FK, are also present on the inside of the liner here. This particular helmet was captured, like I mentioned, by Julius Habermann, and he mentioned that this was taken somewhere around the Siegfried Line, likely in March or April of 1945. And during our interview, Julius told me that this came from a German soldier who didn't need it any longer when he took it as a souvenir. And for the rest of the war, he carried this with him before sending it home towards the end of the war. And as a testament to Julius's story that this came from a fallen German soldier, there's actually the remnants of blood around the edge of the liner here towards the front and in the sides of this helmet, which just goes to show, the oftentimes brutal situations in which these souvenirs came into the hands of the American GIs who captured them, and how they eventually brought them back to the United States later on.
We got into Germany, and from then on, it was a very warm situation. We got into, Cologne. I think that was the first city that we got into, German city we got into, Cologne. Stayed there for a couple of days, and then started our march through Germany. We went through central Germany all the way to Leipzig, which was the third largest city in Germany, and which we captured in March of 45. I don't remember exactly how I got it, but I know it came from a German soldier who didn't need it any longer, and I kept it. And let's see, where were we? We were not far. We were in central Germany. I carried it for a long while. And then sent it home.
The second helmet, which you see here, is actually a German fireman's helmet. It's not from World War II and likely not from the World War I period either. It's likely late 1800s, perhaps 1880s, 1890s, and it probably came out of a home or somewhere in Germany is what Julius remembers from that period. It's got a small metal badge on the front here, an interesting spiked shape towards the top and the back, and has a little bit of a liner and the remains of the liner string as well. So not as iconic of a helmet as the M42 Stahlhelm, but nevertheless a souvenir that Julius brought back and considered to be an important memento of his service during World War II.
Oh, this thing here. A minute, let me hold it right. Let's see. This here, I must have gotten, I don't recall where I got it from. Must have been from some home that I was in that we were going through or something. But I had no idea what it is and what era it was. I knew it wasn't the Second World War. And just was interesting. It's a shame because it had a visor around it here that went into these. There was more to it that got destroyed or got lost or something. But it had like a little strap that would come down from these two knobs here.
Now, this is one of many videos we're going to be doing on this channel about souvenirs of war that were captured during World War II, both in Europe and in the Pacific. So if you're interested in learning more about the artifacts in our collection and seeing more of these videos, be sure to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and leave a comment down below.
That was awesome, Ben. That's really cool, man. I mean, so often we don't actually get to know the full story behind the items that we're picking up, and to be able to sit there with the veteran that took it home and hear the whole story behind it. I mean, it's pretty cool, man.
It's definitely cool. For lack of a better word, it's been.
I'm underselling it when I say it's cool.
No, trust me, I feel the same way, and it's definitely stuff that I find hard to put into words quite often. Because, like I said, I think I did the interview with Mr. Haberman in 2017. Maybe 2016, so that was quite a while ago. And I think he passed away, and I got the helmet from his widow after he passed. And so, to know that I made an impression on him, his family, and that they trusted me to carry on his legacy through this souvenir, again, that just means a lot. And I'm, of course, grateful to the Haberman family for choosing me to do so, and the hundreds and thousands of other veterans and families who have also donated artifacts. It's definitely a privilege.
Ben, you have to be stoic in the sense that out of anyone I know in this hobby, I mean, we're on different sides of it. I'm more on the military side. You're more on the actual history side. They're both complement each other hand in hand. I can honestly say I think you've probably lost more friends and people you've met than anyone I've ever known. Honestly, I mean, it's unfortunate, but you have made these connections, and it has to be hard because, not that I need a number, but I'm sure a lot of these individuals have unfortunately passed away.
Many of them have. Most recently, I think just in the past 6 months, most of the initial World War II veterans that I first interviewed that I've known for the longest have passed. I think the second World War II veteran I interviewed, he passed back in May, I believe it was. We've known each other for 9 years, so that's a pretty long time. He lived 5 minutes from where I grew up. So I saw him all the time. And then just most recently, I mean, I was just in Normandy for the 80th anniversary of D-Day, working to cover the commemorations. I was there for a month, from late May to late June. And the day that I got back, the night that I returned, I got a message from the wife of a World War II veteran that I knew here in Florida and down in Miami, so a few hours south of me. And she said, he's got hours, if not days, to live. And we had talked in Normandy briefly. He was a 101st Airborne paratrooper. And literally, I got off that flight. I went to sleep for a few hours, literally a few hours. And then I drove down to Miami and saw him. And the next day, he passed away. So sometimes it's not just the fact of going to the funeral, but being with them during some of these last moments and being able to be trusted to do so. by the veteran, by the family, and having that that honor bestowed upon you is really powerful.
That's actually a really interesting point. I think a lot of people might assume that because you've worked with so many veterans that there's almost a less of a personal note there, because, how could you keep in touch with all these people? Obviously you've done so many interviews, but it sounds like you do tend to keep in touch with the people that you interview, and these are more of like lasting relationships for you and for the veteran as well.
Oh, without a doubt. And I think that, you can't stay in touch with everyone. It would be pretty much impossible. I'm doing this pretty much just myself and a few other volunteers at this point. But I'm doing all the interviews myself. So yeah, it's impossible to maintain contact with everyone, but I do try my hardest to stay in touch with the vet, their family, even after they pass away. And I'm grateful for that. And it's also the fact that, oftentimes these veterans don't have a lot of extended family. So I was blessed, I think is a good word to use, to have a really good family growing up. I'm still very close with all of my obviously my parents and my brother and my grandparents. But I hear stories sometimes from these vets and how their families aren't there for them in these final years of their lives. And so, I try as hard as I can to step in, help if I can, and just be there, if not only to just listen and be that person that they can talk to during their time, and it's partly that as well. And I think that I do develop relationships that go far beyond just wanting to hear their old war stories. I think that's a biggest one. Like I said earlier, it's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is that these are not just World War II veterans; these are incredible people as well.
You had mentioned that you were over there for the 80th anniversary of D-Day. I don't know the statistic offhand, but I believe it was under 40 British troops who are actually there are alive these days. The number is dwindling, like you said, it's every day it just goes down and down. I don't know if do you have any photos to share of D-Day when you were over there?
I have Ben's Instagram pulled up here because I'm a follower, as everybody should be, and I think there are some posts. So Ben, if you don't mind, let's take a look at some of your D-Day coverage. Let's start here.
Yeah, so I was there in Normandy, like I said, from late May to the middle end of June. And I worked with a lot of great people over there, including these guys, which you see, Michel Detrez, Emmanuel Line. They run an amazing museum in Normandy. In my opinion, the best museum in Normandy. We did a lot of cool content. We filmed with them. They showed me some amazing helmets, including this one that they just found, literally hanging in a barn somewhere in Normandy, belonged to a paratrooper, an M2 helmet. Absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous lid. So yeah, we did a lot of content like that. Of course, I covered ceremonies with veterans and Normandy's amazing. This is my 5th trip over to Normandy over the past couple of years, and I was there for the 75th and now the 80th, and it's just a great opportunity to pay tribute to the vets who are still alive, but also to the guys who didn't come back. Normandy.
Wow, yeah, this powerful images, man. It must have been a moving thing to have been there.
For sure, it always is. Normandy is my favorite place on Earth. There's no denying that. And on D-Day, on the 6th of June, if you look at the picture right there with the sunset, that was taken at 6:30 in the morning, June 6, 2024, exactly 80 years to the day, on Utah Beach. So there was an event that happened there. They say 15,000 or more people attended. And it was essentially a reenactment. So there was reenactors and also current day U.S. Navy SEALs from SEAL Team 2 that stormed Utah Beach on the anniversary. And it was just a remarkable day, very early day, but remarkable to see how many people from all around the world came out to honor and pay tribute to the men who fought on D-Day. And just, of course, just to stand there 80 years to the minute to when it happened is pretty special as well. And I've always said that I wanted to do that, and finally made it happen this time.
That's amazing. And what an honor, right? What an honor to be able to share that experience with everybody who was there. Without
a doubt, for sure. And I think that, once I did this work for the first couple of weeks in Normandy, I was preparing to go home by the 19th or the 20th. I think I had a flight out of Paris booked for the 20th. And on the 19th, on June 19th, so just a couple weeks ago, a few friends of mine who are actually my neighbors here at home were in Normandy. They'd come into the port of Le Havre on a cruise, and they asked me to take them around for literally a day trip of Normandy. So I took them around and we visited the Normandy American Cemetery as one of the places that we went to. And I noticed this freshly dug grave in the cemetery, a brand new stone, a grave that had dirt all around it. And it was very surprising. If you're not familiar with Normandy American Cemetery, it's a closed cemetery. Only people who were killed in Normandy during the Battle of Normandy, during World War II, are permitted to be buried there. So to see a fresh grave is very, very unusual. I've never seen one. So I walked inside to the folks at American Battle Monuments Commission, asked them the question, well, what's going on? And they told me that this story that an American GI, an American Army officer named Nathan Baskind his remains had been discovered, and that he was going to be reburied at Normandy American Cemetery exactly 80 years to the day since he was killed on June 23rd, 1944. So I literally, that hour, I canceled my flight. I contacted the Battle Monuments Commission. I contacted the organizations that were responsible for making this happen. I got permission to shoot there, got press credentials, everything I needed. And on the 23rd of June, I was able to cover this story. And
I actually, if you don't mind, if I could screen share real quick, I believe I have the link to the story that you wrote, your coverage of this.
Correct. Yeah. So this is the story, and the title is completely true. 80 years he was buried in a Nazi war grave, or a German mass grave at the German War Cemetery at Marigny in Normandy. And now he rests under a Star of David in Normandy American Cemetery. And so it's a remarkable story. Just not only the identification, but the fact that he was resting among those that he was quite literally fighting against for so long. So the story is that a genealogist was perusing the website of the German War Graves Commission, the Volksbund, and noticed the name Nathan Baskind on a picture on the website and thought, well, this is strange. This is a very non-German name, and started to look into the story a little bit more. And what it turns out is that Nathan wasn't killed initially on the 23rd of June. He was actually captured in an ambush and later died in a German hospital. And so the Germans buried his remains like they did with their soldiers. And eventually he was interred among many German soldiers, because at the time there wasn't really technology to identify, whose remains were whose. And so his body pretty much laid there in this German war cemetery with a plaque that had his name on it, and nobody really knew. His family didn't even know that his body was there. And so they discovered this fact. They reached out to an organization called Operation Benjamin, which is dedicated to ensuring that Jewish soldiers are correctly buried in cemeteries, military cemeteries. And they got permission from the German government. They got permission from the French government, as well as from Jewish religious authorities in Israel to, disinter these remains, DNA test them, see if they were in fact his, and then rebury them. And all of it worked out. They were able to get a positive match. And now, his family has closure after 80 years, and just remarkable to witness. And of course, just stumbling across the story by pure coincidence was really special for me to be able to do to close out my time in Normandy.
I know that that a lot of what you do is outreach, and you have speaking engagements, and I'd like, could you speak on how do you tell these stories? How do you spread this out to the public, people that might not be, members of the hobby who might come in contact with it more regularly?
Of course. Yeah. I think there's many different ways in which I, as an individual, but also our nonprofit as a whole, work to educate people about these stories. I do speaking engagements all across the U.S., both to students at schools of all ages, and of course, just programs to regular individuals, adults, seniors as well. And I think that, that's one of the more important parts of this work, is not just capturing the stories, but doing something with them. I think that if you just, do the interview, it's one thing, of course, to the veteran, to the family, to you, to learn. But I think that if you're entrusted with these stories, at least me personally, I feel this I don't know, a duty to be able to share them with others, and make sure that other people are familiar with these stories, and of course make their own interpretations about what they mean, and what they mean to the future of our country, of our world, and of warfare in general. And so, like I said, educational outreach consists of presentations. We do traveling museum exhibitions with artifacts. I wrote a book in 2021 that was published, and it's called World War II History for Teens. And so obviously, as the title suggests, it's for students to learn more about World War II. And so that's really my main mission these days is trying to get these stories told.
Do you have any desire to do anything with a major network? As far as I'm sure you have thousands of hours of interviews. I mean, do you have any production value? You've thought about a television show or something like that? It has to be at least a thought in the back of your mind to get this more mainstream and out there. I mean, if they can make a reality show about the Kardashians, I would much rather watch history and these interviews of these men and what they did for the world. What's your thought on something like that?
I mean, obviously, the thought has crossed my mind. I mean, I think everyone would dream who does this work to get it to reach the most people as possible. And a network TV show or some sort of mainstream content is the ultimate goal. But I'm just afraid of selling out, I think, is the biggest way to say it. And I'm focusing now on putting content out on YouTube, which is freely accessible to people. I can dictate how the interviews are used. I can dictate, if they're monetized or not. I mean, I've released feature-length documentaries about World War II on our YouTube channel that are not monetized, completely free, without ads, just because I think that it's important to tell these stories without interruption, without making money off of it. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. So perhaps in the future, yes, something will work out that will be, agreeable. But I think that right now it's important to stick to my roots and ensure that my stories are told the way that I think they're best told.
That's what a nonprofit's all about, man. I commend you for what you just said. That's awesome.
Truly a man of the people, Ben. Honestly, everything that you've said so far, I'm like, he's just the nicest guy. I'd like to touch on some of your personal work, if you don't mind me plugging your website real quick here. We're still on the article. Just give me 1 second. But you've been spending some time in Ukraine and doing other things. And it's just really compelling, the stuff that I've seen you post on social media. So I was hoping you might give us a little bit of a guide here.
For sure. Yeah. So to give you a little bit of context, how I ended up doing work in Ukraine, I mean, I've done 5 trips in the past 2 years since the full-scale war in Ukraine began. And I've been working as a journalist accredited with the Ukrainian Armed Forces. And I think that my goal really is a continuation of my work with documenting World War II. It's to educate people about the reality of what war is, how brutal it is, how people suffer, and the fact that we really don't want these sort of things to be repeated in the future. So I've worked, like I said, 5 trips over in Ukraine. I began in March of 2022, just about a few weeks after the invasion first began. I've been working on a lot of short stories over there, as well as a bunch of long-term stories. So following people or families or individuals over long periods of time. And my most recent trip over there was in December of 2023 to January 2024. And I did a lot of interesting stories there during the winter battles that were taking place at that time. And it was very cold. I'm from Florida. So yeah, the weather was a big factor, of course. But a lot of incredible people were more than willing to share their stories and the stories of their country, and of course the war that they're waging actively day by day.
It must be a surreal experience. It was surreal enough to see a European war in our lifetimes and to watch it on television, but to be there and to see what's left behind in some of these war-torn areas and stuff that's closer to the front as well. I can't imagine how powerful that must be for you as a correspondent.
Well, what's interesting is the fact that for 9 years now, I've heard stories from World War II veterans. They've told me stories of seeing knocked out tanks, bombed out buildings, losing comrades in battle, seeing rotting corpses. Now I've seen these things with my own 2 eyes. So just from a perspective as a historian and someone who's documenting past conflict, I think it's given me so much more of an appreciation for these World War II vets and what they went through and the psychological impact that war has on just an observer, not even a combatant. And I think that it's made me a much better historian and a much better storyteller to be able to tell the stories of past warring conflict as well. This gentleman here actually is one of the more tragic stories that I've been able to cover and had the opportunity to cover in Ukraine. I first met this man, Kolya Lostianitsky, in May of 2022, and he was a volunteer. He volunteered to defend his city of Sumy in northeastern Ukraine right after the invasion began. And what happened in Sumy was that the police and the military in that region had largely fled when the Russians came, and it was up to the average civilians, the students, the lawyers, the doctors, the teachers, whatever, the construction workers, to fight the Russian army. And so him and a bunch of his comrades broke into the local police station, took all the weapons, and successfully defended their city from Russian capture. And Kolya was there during that. And I had the opportunity to spend some time with him, like I said, May of 2022, and he took me around to all the different locations where he had fought in the previous months and weeks, and where he was continuously fighting the Russian aggression that was pushing across the border there. And he was actually killed in February of 2023. So I was with him in May of 2022. He was killed in February of 2023. And what's interesting is that during my time in Ukraine during that trip, in, like I said, May of 2022, I was staying in, his brother was my driver for about a month. And I was also working with his nephew, who was obviously the son of my driver. We lived in their apartment. So I spent quite a bit of time with this guy. The shirt that you see him wearing in that picture is actually one that I brought for him from the United States, because he didn't have a proper camouflage uniform at the time. And when I left that trip, I gave him my body armor. So, this guy was someone that I had gotten to know pretty well, and his family, of course. So to get that news a few months later was just absolutely devastating. And during a follow-up trip, I had the opportunity, of course, to visit his grave, speak with his family, his 17-year-old daughter, his 10-year-old son, and spend some time with the family there. And, this is just, I think, the reality of war. Put politics, put any motivation aside. This is what happens in war. A family loses a father, and it's a tragic situation, without a doubt.
Ben, thank you for sharing that with us. You've really, it shows that you're doing a lot of work to document these stories. I mean, certainly not just the ones that are a little more antiquated stuff from World War II, but also the more modern stuff. And it's really good work that you're doing. Is there anything that you're working on right now that you might want to tease us with? Any new projects?
Well, we watched the video earlier highlighting the German helmet. And like I said, that's part of a new series where we're highlighting artifacts and also the connection to a veteran. And so I'm working on a new video right now that's going to be released in just a few days. And it's about a World War II veteran that I actually interviewed very, very early on in the project, named Roy Morrison. And he was actually the first person to donate an artifact to the museum, or to the museum collection in our nonprofit archive, his uniform. I was literally 13 years old, and he gave me his Ike jacket from the war. Really, really incredible stuff. But what's most amazing about Roy Morrison is you'll notice that, of course, he's holding a Purple Heart in his hand, and he's wearing a bullet around his neck. Well, Roy's story is fascinating because he was wounded in action in Normandy on the 14th of July, 1944, which was his 20th birthday. And when he was wounded, it was German machine gun fire. He was operated on, and the doctors found and removed one bullet from his leg. Well, what happened was he had actually been hit by 2 bullets. And 60 years later, he had some sciatic pain in his back and in his leg. And so he went to the hospital, and you can pull up now, there's actually an x-ray. There should be an x-ray in there. And so he goes to the hospital.
You have an x-ray.
Talk about keeping a memento from the war. I mean, you got to really work onto something.
It's pretty remarkable. And so
for
60 years, he carried this bullet, had no idea it was in his leg. He was a firefighter in the city of Miami Beach after the war. I mean, he did some pretty crazy stuff. He wasn't just sitting around. And it had finally reached up to the point where it was causing him pain. It never hit bone, as you can see in the x-ray, so it never bothered him in that way. And so, after 60 years, the doctors found it, they removed it. And during our interview, Roy told me that if he could carry the weight all those years, he was going to carry it for the rest of his life. And so for the rest of his life, he wore it on a chain around his neck.
Wow.
Now,
That is amazing, man.
It's an incredible story. And in 2019, Roy passed away, unfortunately. And like I said, I already had his uniform in the collection. I was really close with him and his family, and it was a really tragic loss. And so we were at his funeral, and Roy's son asked me to say a few words about his service, knowing the details that I knew. And so he calls me up there. I speak about Roy's service, and then he reaches into Roy's coffin. And Roy was, of course, wearing this bullet around his neck at the time. The Purple Heart was in the coffin, the casket. And Roy's son, Frank, presents these to me and says that I should be the next caretaker of these artifacts for the future generations. Talk about just the most, I'm still at a loss for words for that experience, and for the honor to be able to be the caretaker of these incredible pieces of history, and of course his story too. So today
That
these
is amazing.
are in our nonprofits collection, and we exhibit them everywhere we go, of course. And they're going to be the subject of our latest video on the YouTube channel, which will be published on the 14th of July on the 80th anniversary of Roy's birthday, of course, during World War II, and of course his wound date as well. So these are some of the artifacts that we'll highlight in the video. We've got some of his German bringbacks as well. There's a little close-up of the bullet you can see there.
That is amazing stuff, man.
Yeah, his
story is absolutely amazing.
You can watch some of his interview in a film that we made called Normandy Revisited, but a lot more of it will be shared in this new video for sure.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to put a link to your YouTube channel in the description, as well as a link to that article that you wrote, if you don't mind.
For sure. Yeah.
And honestly, Ben, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and everything that you've been able to build over the years. This has been an eye-opening experience, and you've been a great guest of the show.
Well, trust me, you guys, it's been an honor to be here, and the help that you guys have provided me over the years in both identifying items, helping me build myself into the person I am today in this hobby, especially Billy Kramer. I have to give a shout out to Billy over here for all his help over the years and identifying all kinds of crazy questions and answering them no matter what time of day. So I appreciate it, Billy. And
it's really cool to be tied to Ben, because Ben's so much hands-on with the vets. We talked to Tom Durante, last time, and he's so much of a research guy. Dante, Josh, we're all sales guys, but we're all intertwined in this of we all care about this stuff, and we just love what this is all about, and it's all relative. And Ben, you are a great person to know on this. I'm happy to have you on here, just like Josh said. I think this is a great episode. Dante and Josh talked a little more than we did, but at the same time, it was so important to hear his side of things and what this is all really about. And again, it's history, and these items all have a story. Every single one of them was brought back by a vet or sat in somebody's drawer. And, there's so many cool things out there. And I think it's really the helmet, dude, mind blowing what that thing saw.
Indeed. Couldn't agree more.
Ben, I just want to say thank you for all that you do. I know that, I admire the kind of work you do, and a little part of me wishes that I was right there with you doing it. So keep doing what you're doing. And yeah, man, just love the stuff you're doing. So keep it up.
Appreciate the support.
Ben, I'm going to need you to come back on in the future so we can live vicariously through you on your adventures. Okay, man?
I'll be here.
Awesome. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for listening. This has been the Militaria Podcast. Again, I am Josh Doda. I run Queen City Militaria, and I've been joined by Benjamin Mack Jackson of the World War II Veterans History Project, and again, a war correspondent covering contemporary conflicts, and my fellow hosts, Dante Gambino of SMG War Relics.
War-relics.com. Thank you very much.
And Billy Kramer of WWII.com.
I would just like to apologize to the entire audience for not wearing a hat. Everyone else had a cool hat. I didn't have one.
You know what, man? Next episode, hats for everyone.